To the introductory video on the Canadian Investment Regulatory Exam, the CIRE for short. So starting January of 2026, those who want to enter Canada's financial industry, they're going to be moving away from the base licensing course called the Canadian Securities course, and the new base licensing course is going to be called the CIRE, which is the Canadian Investment Regulatory Exam. To kind of go through some history, we previously had two regulators, the MFDA and IROC. They merged to create what is now known as CIRO, which is the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization. And that organization, as well as Fitch Learning, they've partnered to create these examination blueprints for the different licensing courses. So today we're just talking about the CIRE. After that, there are going to be 8 more exams that are offered behind it for those, depending on the category of license of the individual. And this was all kind of put together on March the 31st when they announced the blueprint for this first course. So we're going to put this link in the notes of the video. If you go down to the bottom of it, there are 3 appendices. We're going to review each one of them. So to begin with, you have Appendix 3, which is the Guide for Studying. So because you used to have one provider and you got everything from them, including the textbook, well, all of a sudden now you have to ask, how do I study for the exam? Should I self-study, use a provider, and then if we compare the two, what happens? Well, what ends up happening is this. If you use a prep provider, somebody has already gone through to figure out where do you get this information. They put it together in a textbook, and PAPE Canada is going to be doing exactly that. In fact, we already have the rough draft of that textbook completed, and I'm very happy with the work that's going to be produced. Of course, the cons is somebody else has done that for you, so what happens is that there is a cost because you're paying for access to the, let's say, the textbook or whatever preparation materials are out there. So this little document, it's a fairly light document. It's the Guide for Studying. You can go over it if you want. It's also Appendix 3. Now, the regulator has also said, okay, if we're going to publish, let's say, a blueprint, which is Appendix 1, to say, here's everything on the test, what they've also done is in Appendix 2, they have put together a practice exam of 110 questions. As an example, question 2, what is the function of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund? And I have 4 options, A, B, C, D. This is the structure of the exam. If I want the answer, I go all the way down to the bottom where the answers come up. Question 2, the answer is B. So the Canadian Investor Protection Fund is there to provide protection during dealer insolvencies. So you can go back and forth and use the examination that they've published if you'd like. Of course, we're going to be providing additional resources such as mock exams as we move forward. We'll talk about our offering shortly. So for the CIRE exam, this is the syllabus that I call the blueprint. So what it is that it has a number of different learning outcomes, and we're going to talk about those in a moment, but first we're going to talk about the structure of the exam. So we understand that the CIRE is going to be one exam. It's going to be paper-based. It's going to be proctored either remotely or in person, and this is going to be offered by the regulator. So very importantly, regardless of what prep provider you take, if you choose to take one, whatever you pass or don't pass with them, it doesn't have any bearing on your actual result. The result that matters is when you go in to write the exam with the regulator, if you pass it. You have 2 hours to move through 110 multiple choice questions. You have a total of 3 attempts before, I guess, something else has to happen. Importantly, you're not going to have those 3 attempts on the same day. They're going to make you space them out and come back another day. So if you don't pass it the first time, you don't have to do it the same day. You can kind of take some time off and study and then go back. In terms of the different areas, the current base licensing course is 2 different volumes. It has, I think it's 18 chapters or close to 20. It's a lot of chapters. This one only has 9 chapters. There are 9 areas. Each is called an element. You have an overview of the regulatory framework, prospective client relationships. There's a lot of rules to follow when engaging with the client. the scope of the client relationship. So what am I responsible for? What is the client responsible for? If that doesn't go very well, then the client complaints handling, the market and company analysis, that's more broad. Market integrity, trade execution, settlement, that's more specific to the firm or maybe to specific situations or whatever it is. 7 is securities, managed products, and mutual funds. This is product specific, the main products that are sold. The 8th element, derivatives, so calls and puts, forwards and futures. And there's a few more things that have been added in. And then you have the conflicts of interest and ethics component, which is a good weighting. It's 16 questions out of the 110. So before we get down to every single area, and I don't want to go over all of them, just to kind of go over the learning outcomes so you have a general idea, we have to understand the syllabus key. So the syllabus is divided into a series of learning outcomes. Each learning outcome expects the candidate to either remember, that's the lowest, understand, the next step up, apply, the next step up, or analyze, the furthest step up, the information provided. The following sets out what this expectation is. So when you're remembering, you just have to kind of recall informations and facts, such as what is the objective of the CIPF? We just kind of went over that. You just have to know what it's there for. If you're asked to understand something, it requires the candidate to demonstrate comprehension of an issue, fact, rule, or principle. The associated questions include things like describe this or explain that or identify or recognize or select. The third one is apply, which requires the candidate to use the information in new situations. So like a mini case study or a scenario is going to be presented. The associated questions include calculate this, demonstrate that, implement this, interpret, and use. So as an example, the third one, in which of the following situations would a portfolio manager use the money-weighted rate of return rather than the time-weighted rate of return? So to begin with, you have to understand what is the money-weighted rate of return, what is the time-weighted rate of return. It's preferable if you know when you should be using each one, and that way you can kind of run through the 4 scenarios that are presented and you can provide the answer. Finally, analyze requires the candidate to review information and draw conclusions or make connections. Associated questions include you want to compare something, contrast it, differentiate, or examine, so it's more of an analysis type of approach. I'm not going to go any further into this because in each element, as you can see, element 1 has 11 learning outcomes. Number 1, understand. Number 2, understand. 3 and 4, understand. 5, remember. 6, remember. 7, remember. 8, 9, remember. 10, understand. 11 is remember. So, for lack of a better word, do you remember I said what remember is, what understand is, what apply is? So, when we go through this, and we've gone through the whole document to create our own textbook, which I'll show you in a moment, we went through and read each one and said, okay, understand, that's 1. Understand 2. We counted all the understands, all the remembers, all the applies. So starting at remember, which is the base, it came back a total of 40 times. Understand, which is the second one, came back a total of 57 times. And apply came back 2 times. Analyze did not come back at all. It's 0 for this course, the CIRE. So I'm assuming the syllabus key is going to be used across all different types of exams. There are 9 in total. And that way, analyze is going to come back in other examination blueprints. So 40, 57, and 2 times, the total is 99 learning outcomes. So the very first learning outcome here is to understand the role and authority of the Canadian Securities Administrators and the provincial or territorial securities and derivatives regulators. They want us to make sure we touch on the following points: the jurisdiction of the CSA, the mandate and objectives of the CSA, the purpose and implications of securities legislation, including national instruments, multilateral instruments, national policies, staff notices, and companion policies, which include the role of approving prospectuses and, of course, enforcement powers. Now, if we look at all 11 of these learning outcomes, from a very high level, what element 1 says is, here's the summary. So this element requires the candidates to be able to identify, describe, and explain the purpose of the main investment industry regulators in Canada, as well as list and define other regulators and agencies and the markets they oversee. Candidates are required to understand and explain the legislation and controls around anti-money laundering and be able to recall the features of other legislation, including confidentiality and privacy. Okay, so we understand the CSA, we understand CIRE, the rules there, UMIR, okay, the CIPF, the CDS, the CDCC, like these are all things that we want to be aware of. So as we move through the textbook that we've written, we're going to have to go and define these and explain what they are to say, you know, here's the scenario, like who oversees like the derivatives? Well, you got to know it's Canadian Derivatives Clearing Corporation that's going to clear those derivatives trades. If you want to talk about, you know, the proceeds of crime and money laundering and the Anti- or Terrorism Financing Act, well, it's the PCMLTF. And there's a number of items to cover inside of that. So this is what we do in the textbook. And so we're going to go over all of these things. And before we go, I'm going to come back here. We've actually started first with the section on derivatives. The reason being it's one of the more complicated topics, and there's only 6 questions. So it's one of the lighter topics, I guess. And all of them are remember. All 8 of them. It's always remember. So if we were to go through that now, we understand that there's a learning summary at the very top. We've talked about that. So you have the learning summary of what you want to do from a high level. And then there are 8 separate learning outcome statements. Well, here in our textbook, we have the learning summary. We have the 8 different learning outcome statements. That's what drives what we're going to be doing. We, of course, brought back the syllabus key, which is right here on the left-hand side. Remember, understand, apply, and analyze. All of these are remember, so we only bold the remember. And in every section, we start off with a list of abbreviations. And in this case, there's only about 8 of them. So if we go back to the syllabus key here, they want to know about puts and calls, American-style options, and European-style options. So you have to remember the main features of options contract types. So these are the 3 things that we're going to consider. So if we go down to page 6, we ask ourselves, option. Okay, so what is an option? Well, we start by going over what an option really is. It's a financial instrument that gives the owner the opportunity or the option, the choice of buying for a call option or selling, if it's a put option, the shares of a publicly traded company at a specified price. To obtain this privilege, the owner of the option, they have to purchase it from the seller. On their side, the seller has the obligation to deliver the shares or buy them if called on to do so. Of course, there's the call option, and then there's the put option. If we keep going down, we kind of run through some of the most important terminology, like the strike price, the expiration. We talk about the European options, how they can be exercised only upon their maturity, whereas American options, they can be exercised on or before their expiration. Of course, in Canada, we trade the American options. There's no such thing as a Canadian option, by the way. You have American style, and you have European style options. Alrighty. So last up, I want to talk to you most importantly about what we're going to be offering and when it's going to be available. So although the examinations are only going to be available starting January 1st by the regulator, we're aiming for a November 1st, what we call like a knowledge dump. We're going to be uploading a number of videos and PowerPoints to YouTube. We hope to do it by November the 1st. If we have them done before that, we're going to absolutely wait till at least November 1st, maybe a bit later. And that way, when you start with the examination on January the 1st, what ends up happening is that all that content is going to be there for you. So in case you're sitting there in the back half of 2025 and you're wondering, should I take the Canadian Securities course now, knowing there's going to be an overlap, I'll have 6 months or whatever it is to do it, or should I wait a few months and do the CIRE on January the 1st? Well, if you have to get licensed next week, you'd better do what's available. If you can wait for a little while before getting licensed or going into the industry, you can start studying before January the 1st, but the exam's not going to be available until January the 1st. So the first package includes the PowerPoint presentations as well as those YouTube videos, which we run through the PowerPoint presentations. That's included in both 1 and 2. And the reason is because we're putting them on YouTube, so we can't very well tell you that, they're for sale or whatever it is. They're going to be available for everybody. Package 1 just really includes the practice exams for people who think, I can just do it with those YouTube videos. I want to test myself. We put the YouTube videos up for free, so hopefully enough people come in and buy some practice exams. It's worth it for us to keep doing that for free. Of course, package 1 could always go away. And package 2 is kind of the full Monty. So those PowerPoint presentations, they're up on YouTube. We have the practice exams, which are included here in package 1. We have the full textbook, and we have the end of chapter problems, or end of chapter questions. Again, the whole exam is multiple choice, A, B, C, D. On that, I'm going to cut it off here pretty quick. We've gone through the information that I wanted to go through. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll try to get to them. Between now and January the 1st, we expect to have this video up and available. After that, we expect the video to be taken down because as more information comes out, we're going to want to come to the table and kind of review the most relevant, most up-to-date information. Thank you for listening.